Hello and welcome to episode 4. This is GOMEtv and I'll be talking about Bert the Troll. I had a lot of fun playing Bert after I recorded this, and I decided that I'm going to keep playing him afterwards. He was a guardian I used to play a lot when it first came out, and then kind of got interested in other guardians. Bert is one of the few tacticians that does not provide any team buffs through his abilities or his passive. Now what makes Bert a challenge to be laned up against with is his bonfire ability, followed with his stumbling rage. His bonfire ability lasts for 10 seconds and deals damage to enemies and towers caught within medium range of the flames, and are dealt 10 damage, scaling up to 40 ability damage per second. Now this ability might seem like it doesn't do too much damage, but kept in it long enough, that damage will add up. And also, while the bonfire ability is active, your stumbling rage ability is able to affect enemies and towers for 20 damage, up to 65 damage per second for 5 seconds. Because of Bert's lasting bonfire ability, make sure you put it where it really counts. Try to always place it in the beginning of the game where the enemy waves of soldiers will be. Also, when capturing shrines in the beginning of the game, be careful of placing your bonfire ability over those shrines, because it's easy for enemy guardians to simply walk out of range. Now as you can see here, I try to place my bonfire on top of the incoming enemy soldier waves, and also when I can, at any safe opportunity, place your bonfire on top of the tower. Because it lasts for 10 seconds, it can be very effective at whittling enemy towers' health down. And as you can see here, when there is no resistance, it makes it very easy for Bert to keep placing his ability over the enemy tower. Towards the beginning of the game, I always like to try to capture the shrines number 2 and 3, which are the ones towards the center that give you resistance. As you can see here, I see my teammate being pushed back in the middle lane, so I decided to give him some help. As you can see, my ability was very effective at getting rid of the enemy creeps and also for controlling the lane. That's very important as a tactician, is that you want to be able to control your lane. Now I kind of wandered here from the bottom lane up into the middle lane, and that's only because I saw that my teammate in the middle lane was getting pushed back. As far as the loadout I'm running, I try to run an early game belt, which is also activated towards the middle of the game and late game. For the first relic, I use Seed of Seeing, which gives me, for every sapphire in your belt, 14 ability power. And then I stack those with 2 ability gems, and that's going to give me 132 ability power. Strong ability power in the beginning of the match will really help Bert control his lane. For my second relic, I use Shadow's Reach, and what that does is it gives me 3 damage per level to all enemy guardians within 4 meters of you every second, which does not stack. And what this is going to allow me to do is when I pull enemy guardians into my flames, it's really going to give me a boost of damage inside that area of effect. The last relic I like to use for Bert is Orthanic Relic, and it gives you 5 ability penetration per sapphire in your belt. And I always carry that one at the end of my loadout because penetration will be much more useful late game than early game. When choosing which abilities to level up first, I recommend always leveling up your bonfire ability first. It's really Bert's bread and butter. Following your bonfire, always level up Mutton. Mutton's going to give you a big boost of damage when you pull enemy guardians into you, and it's also very useful when pulling enemy guardians away when you're chasing them down. When your stumbling rage ability is active, make sure you always level that as a priority. This will really help you do a lot of extra damage to towers, and also it's a very useful ability in team fights, which is going to allow you to fear enemy guardians. In my opinion, most players underestimate Bert's abilities. This is another reason why I prefer to run an early game loadout as opposed to a late game belt. As you can tell from the game so far, me and Elder have done a pretty good job controlling our lane and holding the enemy guardians off of the shrines that we capture. What you have to keep in mind when playing Bert is you can't get overly aggressive. He's a very fragile guardian, and he doesn't have a lot to defend himself with when his abilities are on cooldown. For that reason, I like to save his Spirit's ability when all my other abilities are on cooldown. This will allow me to make my quick escape when I have no other abilities active. If you've noticed, the enemy tower's health has really been whittled down with my bonfire ability throughout the match. Now what surprises me most about this matchup right now is the fact that we're able to hold off Snaga and Agandel. And you can really see how mean Bert is early game so far when I'm running AP in the beginning. This is actually the first time I ran Bert, probably in months. And after playing this game, I really wanted to keep playing Bert. He's a pretty brutal guardian, and I do hear a lot of people say that he is overpowered, But surprisingly, even though people say he's overpowered, I hardly ever see him in a matchmaking game. That might be contributing to the fact that a lot of players tend to be a little aggressive when playing Bert, and I think that's because he does have a passive ability that gives him lifesteal when making a basic attack in his bonfire. But what you do have to realize, like I said a little bit earlier in the video, is that he is very fragile, and you only want to kind of push him up when you know you can make a strike. And I love when I get my ultimate, especially when I get to start hitting a tower with it, because it really starts to take that tower's health down quick. And what's nice about it is you can just lay your ability on the tower and run away, and there's nothing that the enemy guardian can even do about it. Now, as far as commands go for Bert, there are 4 that I really recommend. I know usually commands are more of like a personal choice, but I think that your first command should be heal, and that's due to the fact that Bert isn't a very tanky guardian. The next command that I like to choose is refresh, and what that'll do is it'll reduce my cooldown times and my allies by a significant amount. Now, I really only save this one when it's late game and I'm anticipating a team fight, and I know that my main abilities aren't going to be active by the time that the 2 groups meet up. And I think this one's pretty important even though I don't really use it too often, and that's just because Bert really has nothing to contribute when his bonfire and his ultimate are on cooldown. The third command I use, and the one I use most often, is Amplify ability. And this is a really great command late game and when you get your ultimate. And what this will do is it'll really add a lot more burn damage, and it'll increase your ability power by 200 and also your ability penetration, which will make your abilities much more effective, and it'll have a lasting burn that can finish off enemy guardians even if they try to make an escape. And then the final command I like to use is Flash of Light. What that does is blinds and silences enemy guardians within an aura for 1.7 seconds. This is a really great command for almost any guardian, really, because what it does is it really kind of confuses the enemy team. There's no real visualization for it, and so people get really confused when they're trying to spam their abilities, make attacks, and they realize they can't do any damage, and it really puts a halt to the team fight that they're trying to start. As you may notice, Bert's bonfire ability has really kind of put a barrier in between me and the enemy guardians, and this has been proven very successful in not only holding our ground but also allowing us a point to keep continuing our advance on their enemy base. As you can see here, I'm taking down a lot of towers with my teammates, and the enemy guardians really have been avoiding my bonfire. And what's kind of surprising to me about that is that if you stood in that bonfire ability, yeah, it does add up, but it still really doesn't do too much damage. It's more of the fact of how much damage it'll do once I pull you into it and use my ultimate on you. As far as team composition goes, when you choose Bert, I think he could really go well with almost any team. His ability allows him to work well with archers because of the space it creates in between you and the enemy guardians. And he also works well with guardians that have good controlling abilities and roots, which allows him to hold them for an additional amount of damage. While I didn't talk too much about other types of loadouts with Bert, I would say for one of the most common things I see with him is don't really focus on rogues with cooldown. It's not going to really do too much in a 3-lane match. I would say maybe save that more for a 1-lane match where you want to keep that bonfire ability always up and ready to lay down so that the enemy guardians can't move up easily. To me with Bert, it's more about laying down your abilities where they matter at the most opportune time. And you can see there I got a lot of them with that burn ability, and a lot of them fled, making it very easy for my team to keep hitting their towers and take them down. You can see here we're almost at the very last tower. Now, one thing you might have seen during this is that sometimes I use my ultimate when my bonfire wasn't active, making it really only a fear. But that can still be really effective at times, especially, for instance, when you saw the Malthasauron using his ultimate, which will really do a ton of damage to my team overall. So to me, it was really useful in that situation. You can see we finished the last base. I want to thank you guys for watching my videos. I also want to hear what kind of loadout you like to use for Bert. Thanks. And also, don't forget to subscribe and tell other players about my channel.
Victory!